The country was now becoming more populous, and several thousand were assembled. And thus the work went on, multitudes being thus reached by the preached gospel, who could not be reached in any other way. Life on the frontier was by no means devoid of its enjoyments as well as of its intense excitements. It must have also been an exceedingly busy life. There were no mills for cutting timber or grinding corn, no blacksmith shops to repair the farming utensils. There were no tanneries, no carpenters, shoemakers, weavers. Every family had to do everything for itself. The corn was pounded with a heavy pestle in a large mortar, made by burning an excavation in a solid block of wood. By means of these mortars, the settlers, in regions where saltpetre could be obtained, made very respectable gunpowder. In making corn meal, a grater was sometimes used, consisting of a half circular piece of tin, perforated with a punch from the concave side. The ears of corn were rubbed on the rough edges, and the meal fell through the holes on a board or cloth placed to receive it. They also sometimes made use of a hand mill, resembling those alluded to in the Bible. These consisted of two circular stones. The lowest, which was immovable, was called the bedstone; the upper one the runner. Two persons could grind together at this mill. The clothing was all of domestic manufacture. A fabric called linsey woolsey was most frequently in use, and made the most substantial and warmest clothing. It was made of flax and wool, the former the warp, the latter the filling. Every cabin almost had its rude loom, and every woman was a weaver. The men tanned their own leather. A large trough was sunk in the ground to its upper edge. Bark was shaved with an axe and pounded with a mallet. Ashes were used for lime in removing the hair. In the winter evenings the men made strong shoes and moccasins, and the women cut out and made hunting shirts, leggings, and drawers. Hunting was a great source of amusement, as well as a very exciting and profitable employment. The boys were all taught to imitate the call of every bird and beast in the woods. The skill in imitation which they thus acquired was wonderful. Hidden in a thicket, they would gobble like a turkey and lure a whole flock of these birds within reach of their rifles. Bleating like a fawn, they would draw the timid dam to her death. The moping owls would come in flocks attracted by the screech of the hunter, while the packs of wolves, far away in the forest, would howl in response to the hunter's cry. The boys also rivaled the Indians in the skill with which they would throw the tomahawk. With a handle of a given length, and measuring the distance with the eye, they would throw the weapon with such accuracy that its keen edge would be sure to strike the object at which it was aimed. Running, jumping, wrestling were pastimes in which both boys and men engaged. Shooting at a mark was one of the most favorite diversions. When a boy had attained the age of about 12 years, a rifle was usually placed in his hands. In the house or fort where he resided, a porthole was assigned him, where he was to do valiant service as a soldier, in case of an attack by the Indians. Every day he was in the woods hunting squirrels, turkeys, and raccoons. Thus he soon acquired extraordinary expertness with his gun. The following interesting narrative is taken from Ramsay's Annals of Tennessee, which state was settled about the same time with Kentucky and with immigrants from about the same region. The settlement of Tennessee was unlike that of the present new country of the United States. Immigrants from the Atlantic cities, and from most points in the western interior, now embarked upon steamboats or other craft, and carrying with them all the conveniences and comforts of civilized life, indeed many of its luxuries, are in a few days, without toil, danger, or exposure, transported to their new abodes, and in a few months are surrounded with the appendages of home, of civilization, and the blessings of law and of society. The wilds of Minnesota and Nebraska, by the agency of steam or the stalwart arms of Western boatmen, are at once transformed into the settlements of a commercial and civilized people. Independence and St. Paul, 6 months after they are laid off, have their stores and their workshops, their artisans and their mechanics. The mantua maker and the tailor arrive in the same boat with the carpenter and the mason. The professional man and the printer quickly follow. In the succeeding year the piano, the drawing room, the restaurant, the billiard table, the church bell, the village and the city in miniature are all found, while the neighboring interior is yet a wilderness and a desert. The town in comfort, taste, and urbanity are first; the clearing, the farmhouse, the wagon road, and the improved country second. It was far different on the frontier of Tennessee. At first a single Indian trail was the only entrance to the eastern border of it, and for many years admitted only the hunter and the pack horse. It was not till the year 1776 that a wagon was seen in Tennessee. In consequence of the want of roads, as well as of the great distance from the sources of supply, the first inhabitants were without tools, and of course without mechanics, much more without the conveniences of living and the comforts of housekeeping. Luxuries were absolutely unknown. Salt was brought on pack horses from Augusta to Richmond, and readily commanded $10 a bushel. The salt gourd in every cabin was considered a treasure. The sugar maple furnished the only article of luxury on the frontier, coffee and tea being unknown or beyond the reach of settlers. Sugar was seldom made, and was used only for the sick, or in the preparation of a sweetened dram at a wedding, or on the arrival of a newcomer. The appendages of the kitchen, the cupboard, and the table were scanty and simple. Iron was brought at great expense from the forages east of the mountains on pack horses, and was sold at an enormous price. Its use was, for this reason, confined to the construction and repair of plows and other farming utensils. Hinges, nails, and fastenings of that material were seldom seen. The costume of the first settlers corresponded well with the style of their buildings and the quality of their furniture. The hunting shirt of the militiaman and the hunter was in general use. The rest of their apparel was in keeping with it, plain, substantial, and well adapted for comfort, use, and economy. The apparel of the pioneer's family was all homemade, and in a whole neighborhood there would not be seen, at the first settlement of the country, a single article of dress of foreign manufacture. Half the year, in many families, shoes were not worn. Boots, a fur hat, and a coat, with buttons on each side, attracted the gaze of the beholder, and sometimes received censure or rebuke. A stranger from the old States chose to doff his ruffles, his broadcloth, and his queue, rather than endure the scoff and ridicule of the backwoodsman. The dwelling house on every frontier in Tennessee was the log cabin. A carpenter and a mason were not needed to build them, much less the painter, the glazier, and the upholsterer. Every settler had, besides his rifle, no other instrument but an axe or hatchet and a butcher knife. A saw, an auger, a file, and a broadaxe would supply a whole settlement, and were used as common property in the erection of the log cabin. The labor and employment of a pioneer family were distributed in accordance with surrounding circumstances. To the men it was assigned the duty of procuring subsistence, and materials for clothing, erecting the cabin and the station, opening and cultivating the farm, hunting the wild beasts, and repelling and pursuing the Indians. The women spun the flax, the cotton and the wool, wove the cloth, made them up, milked, churned, and prepared the food, and did their full share of the duties of housekeeping. Could there be happiness or comfort in such dwellings and such a state of society? To those who are accustomed to modern refinements, the truth appears like fable. The early occupants of log cabins were among the most happy of mankind. Exercise and excitement gave them health. They were practically equal, common danger made them mutually dependent, brilliant hopes of future wealth and distinction led them on, and as there was ample room for all, and as each newcomer increased individual and general security, there was little room for that envy, jealousy, and hatred which constitute a large portion of human misery in older societies. Never were the story, the joke, the song, and the laugh better enjoyed than upon the hewed blocks or puncheon stools around the roaring log fire of the early western settler. On the frontier the diet was necessarily plain and homely, but exceedingly abundant and nutritive. The Goshen of America furnishes the richest milk and the most savory and delicious meats. In their rude cabins, with their scanty and inartificial furniture, no people ever enjoyed in wholesome food a greater variety or a superior quality of the necessaries of life. A writer of that day describes the sports of these pioneers of Kentucky. One of them consisted in